So we are reading today from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 15, Text 7. Dehena dehino raja, deha deho vijayate, bija eva yata bijam, deyata iva sasvata. So we can recite the word by word together. Dehena,
Dehena,
by the body.
by the body.
Dehena,
Dehena,
of the Father,
of the Father,
possessing a material body.
possessing a material body.
Rajan,
Rajan,
O King.
O King.
Deha,
Deha,
from the body.
from the body.
Of the mother.
Of the mother.
Deha,
Deha,
another body.
another body.
Abhijayate,
Abhijayate,
takes birth.
takes birth.
Bija,
Bija,
from one seed.
from one seed.
Eva,
Eva,
indeed.
indeed.
Yata,
Yatha,
just as.
just as.
Bijam,
Bijam,
another seed.
another seed.
Dehi,
Dehi,
a person who has accepted a material body.
a person who has accepted a material body.
Artha,
Artha,
the material elements.
the material elements.
Eva,
Eva,
like.
like.
Sasvata,
Sarvata,
eternal.
eternal.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Please repeat the translation with me. As from one seed,
As from one seed,
another seed is generated.
another seed is generated.
O King,
O King,
so from one body,
so from one body,
the body of the Father,
the body of the Father,
through another body,
through another body,
the body of the Mother,
the body of the Mother,
a third body is generated.
a third body is generated,
The body of a Son.
the body of the Son.
As the elements
As the elements
of the material body
of the material body
are eternal,
are eternal,
the living entity
the living entity
who appears to these material elements
who appears through these material elements
is also eternal.
is also eternal.
Purport. From Bhagavad Gita, we understand that there are two energies, namely the superior energy and inferior energy. Inferior energy consists of the 5 gross and 3 subtle material elements. The living entity who represents the superior energy appears in different types of bodies through these elements by the manipulation or supervision of the material energy. Actually, both the material and spiritual energies, matter and spirit, exists eternally as potencies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The potent entity is the Supreme Person, since the spiritual energy, the living being, who is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, desires to enjoy this material world. The Lord gives him a chance to accept different types of material bodies and enjoy or suffer in different material conditions. Factually, the spiritual energy, the living entity who desires to enjoy material things, is manipulated by the Supreme Lord. The so-called father and mother have nothing to do with the living entity. As a result of his own choice and karma, the living being takes different bodies through the agency of so-called fathers and mothers. Dehana dehino raja, deha deho vijayate, bija devayata bijam, deyata imasasvata. As from one seed another seed is generated, O king, so from one body, the body of the father, through another body, the body of the mother, a third body is generated, the body of a son. As the elements of the material body are eternal, the living entity who appears through these material elements is also eternal. So is it an interesting point here is that it is mentioned that both energies are eternal. Both the material energy, which is the phenomenal world, and the spiritual energy, which is the living beings, they are both eternal. And when we read the Bhagavad Gita, we primarily become impressed by Krishna that the soul is eternal and the material body is temporary. So this point about the material energy being also eternal can maybe raise an eyebrow, because we're used to hearing that the soul is eternal and the matter is temporary. But here we have it, that the matter itself, being also a potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is also an eternal entity. So we may ask, no, why is it like that? So we may think of reasons, and one instance Prabhupada speaks about, that is a government. They have different. One explanation Prabhupada gives is that the government, they have different facilities for the citizens of the land, of the country, and they say they have educational facilities. They have an army. They maintain an army, and they also maintain a prison house for those who choose to disobey the laws of the state. So as the government takes care as much to maintain the prison house as to maintain the educational facilities, universities, colleges and so forth. So also you may say that the material energy is required, and we may say that it is required because if it wasn't there, if the living entity didn't have a choice to rebel or to go against Krishna, but always had to be there, then the question of free will, you couldn't really speak of free will. Free will wouldn't exist as such. So that's one way we may understand that the material entity is eternal. In order to facilitate eternally the living entity's free will, as with the example of the prison house, government maintaining the prison house. So that's, I would say, is the first point you could say something. And there's another thing which actually caught my attention, and that is to the end of the purport. It is stated, factually, the spiritual energy, the living entity who desires to enjoy material things, is manipulated by the Supreme Lord. So this is interesting, actually, because we come here to enjoy and think ourselves separate from the Lord, and we have very much established in this consciousness, but it is nevertheless said that such a rebellious living entity is manipulated by the Lord. So how is that? Well, this is one feature actually of the Lord, which is relating to His omnipotence. You may say that we decide to enjoy and we get together, we establish a family and we decide to have a child. So that child coming, that particular child, was it by chance that that particular child was coming? So we say it's all orchestrated in a way that is achinta, abeda tattva, that's inconceivable. A living entity, he performs karma. He does throughout his life, he performs activities, sinful and inauspicious, impious. So he has a stockpile of karma. So that stockpile of karma has to be enjoyed or suffered in the material world. So somewhere he has to take birth. He has to take birth in a particular condition in order to suffer and enjoy that karma. And by the Lord's manipulation, or under the Lord's perfect arrangement, two living entities, they get together and they beget a child. And that child, that person who had that particular type of karma to enjoy or suffer exactly in that particular way, takes birth from these two, from that particular father and that particular mother. So how this mathematics, it solves, you may say, how this big calculation, how this ends up in a perfect bottom line, this is actually part of the Lord's inconceivable feature. How by His will, this completely inconceivably complicated interaction of unlimited souls and an unlimited stockpile of karma, how this works, this is completely beyond the capacity of any living entity, conditioned living entity, to actually comprehend. Even our own karma, it is said that we have been here countless of an unlimited number of lives we have wandered in the material universe. Even to calculate our own karma, that will be a difficult or impossible task. And Krishna, he says in Bhagavad Gita, "O Partha, many, many lives you and I have passed in this material world. I can remember all of them, but you cannot." So Krishna, he remembers all the karma performed by any particular living entity, and also the totality of karma performed by all the unlimited living entities who are in the material world. So this is actually one feature of the Lord we may appreciate, that by His omnipotence He is able to orchestrate something which is inconceivable, beyond our, far beyond, unlimitedly beyond our limited capacity. So that is one part of the Lord's magnificence, omnipotent. He is omnipresent and He is omniscient. He is able to understand what goes on in every nook and corner of His creation. And He is able to orchestrate the workings that we see around us, the inconceivable workings. So this is actually how the living entity is manipulated by the Lord, and not even directly, because he doesn't do it himself. He's not interested himself. He said that he's not interested in the activities of the material world, that the material father and material mother gets together and begets a child. That may be very interesting to the conditioned living entity. You know, the mother and father, they may be very interested to welcome this child. Oh yes, now we will get a child, our life will be perfect. We will be able to do so many things together and make our life so interesting. But it is said that the Lord, He's not interested in the material exchanges that conditioned souls, they interact with each other in the material world. Although for the particular conditioning entities, this may be the all in all. But the Lord is not very interested who gets together with who. This goes on under the superintendence of his lower energy, of his material energy. As we know that the Lord has a separate interest from the dealings of ourselves, of our conditioned living beings. So that's also one practical point. What can we take of a practical point from that? Well, if we hear that the Lord is not particularly interested in what the material bodies are doing here in the material world, He doesn't take an interest, He's not personally interested in it. So that should mean that identifying with the Lord, we know here, and as is said in the verse, that the living entity is a part and parcel of the Lord. So if you know our Supreme Source is not very much interested in the activities of this material world, then also we should also not be too much interested in the activities of this material world, given that it's a temporary manifestation. And the example which we may take to understand this is that when we are in this world, we should develop a bus stop mentality. So if you're sitting in the bus stop, you're waiting for the bus to come. So you don't make a particular arrangement to stay very comfortably there, because you know the bus is coming. It's not like you order a 5-course meal and you order somebody to come and give you a massage. Really, you're on the bus stop, you know, in 5 minutes the bus is going to come. So it is not like we make a big arrangement that we should be very comfortable, in the bus stop. So that is actually what we should have while we're here. We should actually have a bus stop mentality. We should not have the mentality that this is a permanent arrangement, that it's very important, that we should try to squeeze out the maximum amount of enjoyment, of this limited time we have on the bus stop. No, that's not. We're waiting for the bus. We're eager to see when is the bus coming, and when can we jump on it, and then when can we go to our destination. So we should have a sane realization that all of what we see is temporary, and we should only invest ourselves as much into the temporary manifestation as is favorable for our advancement in Krishna consciousness. What is pleasing to the Lord, as much as this is pleasing to the Lord, we should invest ourselves. And that said, it is not like also we become completely, it's encouraged that we become completely callous to the material world and reject it altogether, as you may say, the Mayavadis, they may reject it in the way the Mayavadis rejection. So renunciation is good, but the only flaw in the Mayavadi rejection is that they say it is false, that it doesn't exist, and that's the problem is that it's not false. It does. It's temporary. The Lord created it It is created by his potency, which exists and is created under his direction. So it definitely, the Lord definitely has invested himself in this material world. So say that it is false, that which is created by the Lord is false, that is a false understanding in itself. So we don't hate the material world in that sense. It is the manifestation of the Lord for the particular purpose of facilitating the free will of the living entity. So it is required. And to the degree to which we entangle ourselves in this material world, we have to deal with it accordingly. We have to deal with it in such a particular way that it actually satisfies the Lord. So that means, of course, there needs to be affection. There needs to be exchange of affection. And even though that affection may deal with the external material body, nevertheless it should definitely be there. As we know, there's loving exchanges between devotees in either status of life, be they brahmacharis, be they grihastas with children. There should be loving exchanges, definitely, because that satisfies the Lord. And that loving exchange, it moves and it is facilitated through the material body in itself, but always with the idea that whatever we do here, however we act, that bottom line should be how it satisfies the Lord. And in that way the Vaishnava, he acts in the world. Simply one calculation is there in the head of the Vaishnava. How will what I'm doing satisfy the Lord? That is the only profit calculation actually. And that differs very much from the profit calculation of the materialist. The materialist profit calculation, that only makes sense in terms of how much satisfaction is generated for his own self, for my own senses, my own gross and subtle senses, mind, intelligence, false ego, and the senses made up of matter. So that's the difference in profit calculation. That's also what we hear in Chitraketus. We are hearing that Maharaj Chitraketu and his wife Kritajuti, they were devastated when the child was taken away from them. And Kritajuti, he proceeded to actually condemn and curse the Lord for his cruelty that he took away that child, which was so important that they had to enjoy, that it was simply the sum and substance of their life. So the profit calculation there was of the material kind, that now this was bad, this was not favorable for my sense enjoyment. So now this is somebody's fault, and somebody needs to be accused and blamed for this. So that is maybe also a practical lesson that we will take from today's class. That do we not see in ourselves that sometimes when something goes against our interest, our personal material interest, what is the reaction? Where does the finger go? Does it go towards ourselves? I did this, I deserve this. Or does it go outside to blame someone? He did this. And to the degree we put the finger outside and find someone to point the finger and say, he is the reason for this, that means Kritajuti. That means that we're following in the footsteps of Kritajuti. So that's one practical point that we have to observe, that when somebody steps on our toes or we lose something, here Maharaj Chitraketu and Queen Kritajuti, they lost a child. So that's not ordinary. It doesn't happen every day. But we may find that we do definitely lose something. Something is taken away from us on a regular basis. So how do we react? So we can actually see if we're reacting like Queen Kritajuti, or if we're reacting detached, as is recommended here. Narada Muni is speaking philosophy, how to see the whole thing in its proper context. So how to react according to the instruction of Narada Muni. So we have to see. Immediately when something happens that we perceive, this is not favorable for my sense, this is not favorable, this is harming my interests, where does the blame go? Do we blame our own karmas? As we hear here, the living entity, he carries so much karma which he has to suffer and enjoy. Do we blame ourselves for actually having created that karma in a past life? Or do we point the finger to put the blame on somebody else? This is actually where we can understand whether we have understood the philosophy or not. Because this is a daily test. There's this world, this reality it's full of social interaction. It's full of it's full of things which are pleasing and displeasing to our senses. So we will definitely come across situations on the street. Somebody may speak harshly or neglectfully like that. So then also you have to be ready to check oneself. Is this the person? Is that particular person's fault? Do we get angry, or do we control ourselves and in a measured, controlled way react accordingly? So that's actually the wonderful thing about Sankirtan, proof distribution, or any type of interaction with persons, any you can say frequent and intense interaction with other living entities, which book distribution definitely is. You will definitely be tested on this ground. Somebody will definitely test you, or Krishna will test you through the agency of someone else, and then we can see actually, have we understood the philosophy properly according to Narada Muni, or are we still on the level of, or are we taking the example of Krita Juti like that and immediately pointing the blame. So this is a very nice exercise, which we may take with us when we go out and distribute. How are we reacting? Are we blaming our own karmas, or are we blaming that particular person who's dishing out the karma to us, like that? And this is of course very easy to speak about theoretically in the classroom. So it is actually out there that it is that we can see and measure. And also you will get it in the temple somehow or other. If we're staying, if we're doing services also in the temple, for sure we will also be tested. You know, the fellow brahmacharis may test us in so many ways, which may need not mention. You can yourself imagine how many ways we're tested on a daily basis, like that. So the tests are there. Krishna is very kind. He doesn't just leave us with the theory. He also comes with the practical. Like when you learn to get a license, you want to drive a car, and you get the development, so I want to drive a car. You go through both the theory and the practical lesson, driving lessons. So we're not cheated. We don't lack the practical lessons also. Even though our service may not be to go out daily with books, we will get the lessons, so we don't need to worry. It's not exclusive on Sankirtan that you'll be tested. You'll be tested anywhere you go, like that. So I would say, if we take any lesson with us, that's a really practical. That's one practical lesson we may take. Let's see how we do it. Also. So I would like to round off actually. This is pretty much the practical, the points I would take out of today's translation. But maybe you have something to add. Yes.
You mentioned this eternality of even the material energy.